So here I've got a little 5mm round bezel cup and a little 5mm round cabochon stone, which I'm going to set into it, and I have a ring band which I'm going to solder the bezel cup onto. The other thing I need to think about is the bezel cups often come in a standard height, a fixed height, but the stones will be all different heights. The curves of the stone will start at different points, so you can see this one, the curve starts about there. But if I push that next to it, that means that potentially the wall of this could be a little bit high for the stone, but I'm going to check it after it's soldered on and decide whether or not I need to file that wall a little bit lower, because we don't want to push the wall over the curve of the stone and end up covering up all the pretty green of the stone. We want it to be the right height for what we're setting. So I've set my ring and my setting up ready to solder, and the way I've done that is I've popped the ring band into the third hand tweezers, and it's sitting nice and snugly on top of that setting, and the setting is evenly either side of the ring band, and a little bit of solder is sat on the back of the setting but nestled up against the ring band, so it's touching both surfaces where it needs to join, but it's directly opposite where I'm going to be heating, because the solder is going to want to run towards the heat. So that's me ready to go. I've lit my torch. I'm just going to heat the air surrounding my piece a little bit first, so that the water in the flux can evaporate nice and slowly. If you want to recap on any of this, you can go back to last month's post, make it month 4. And then when I've allowed the water to evaporate slowly, I'm going to go in and get my ring band up to temperature. So again, if you remember from last month's post, it's really important, because the ring is bigger and chunkier than the setting, that I focus all the heat on the ring band initially, and I'm trying to avoid the setting, because both elements that we're trying to solder together, in this case the ring band and the little setting cup, need to be the same temperature, the same soldering temperature, that nice red colour, at the same time. So now the ring's up to temperature. Now I'm going to heat both areas together until the solder runs, and that's it gone. Now the setting's soldered onto the ring band. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop my stone in, but like we just discussed a minute ago, I don't want the wall of the setting being so high that it ends up covering a lot of the stone. So what we normally advise is to get a length of dental floss, lay it over your setting, pop the stone in, and then that way if the stone gets stuck, you're able to pop the stone out. But I don't have the floss here today, so I'm going to show you another way you can go about it. So for example, I've popped that stone in, and if you can see, the wall is quite high on the stone. There's only a tiny bit of green popping out, so though I could set it like this, it's going to cover up quite a lot of the surface area of my stone. Now if that was stuck in there, that would be an issue, because if I want to lower the wall, I need to file it. If it gets stuck, one of the things that you can try is getting a Tupperware, popping it in, putting the lid on, and playing the maracas. And hopefully, your stone should pop out. If I decided that the wall was a bit high, which it is, and I didn't want to file it lower, the other option I've got is I could pop a little circle of metal or a little spiral of wire, if it's a translucent stone, in there, and that's just going to make the stone sit higher in the setting. See the difference? Much more green sitting up now, because I've put that little bit of silver, a little silver disc, underneath my stone. It was a 0.5mm piece of silver, so it's now sitting higher up. If your stone's opaque, it doesn't matter too much what you put underneath your stone to raise it a little bit higher. as long as it's something that's nice and even so the stone's not going to be rocking around too much. If it's a translucent stone, you need to try and make sure it's something that you can't see when you look through the stone, something that's not going to, you know, spoil the look of the stone, which is when cutting a little circular disc of silver the same size as the bottom of the setting. And I did that by using a little shape template. So I drew the right size circle, cut it out with my saw, popped it in. Or like I say, if it's opaque, I could have just coiled around a little bit of wire, popped that in, that would have been a bit easier. But now it's ready to set, so I'm going to grab my setting tools. To set the stone, we're pushing that wall of the setting over the curve of the stone. So to do that, the most common tools are a pusher. We push it over the curve of the stone, or a rocker, which does a very similar job. And then once you've pushed it as much as you can, as tight as you can with one of those two tools, you'd get a burnisher and burnish out any crinkly edges. So to set the stone, what we need to do is we need to push that wall over the curve of the stone, and that's what's going to hold it in place. And the normal tools to do that would be a pusher, which is normally a straight piece of steel with a flat end on it, and you would use this to push that wall over the stone, or a rocker, which I always think looks like a rocking horse. And similar, you use that to push to push the wall nice and tight over the curve of the stone. When you've pushed it as much as possible and as tight as possible, you then smooth it all out with a burnisher. So again, highly polished piece of steel, normally long and fairly wide. While it's nice to have the proper tools for the job, at the end of the day, all these are polished pieces of steel. So if you want to have a go at your first cabochon setting and you don't want to invest in the tools, you can use teaspoons as a substitute. So if we have a look at this, can you see this one has a nice flat edge on it? That could be used in place of a pusher. Or if it had a curved edge, that could be used in place of a rocker. And to then burnish out afterwards to smooth everything off, you can use the bowl of the teaspoon. So it'll do exactly the same job as these tools. The only difference is they're not quite as ergonomic when you're using them, but as a free, everyone will have teaspoons kicking about the place, so it's a very, very cheap or even free way of having a go at cabochon setting. To set your stone, what you're going to do is take your pusher, push it up against the edge of your setting, push and rock it over the curve of the setting. Now it's really important, at least initially while you do this, you support the other side with your finger, because otherwise you push and the chances are you're just going to ping that stone straight out. The other important thing is, once you've done one side, to work on the directly opposite side. So push and rock. The reason being, if I was working my way around the clock, I run the chance of just pushing the stone up and out of the setting, whereas if I work at opposites, I'm more likely to be setting it evenly. So again, push up against the wall, curve over the stone. Opposite side, push, curve. So I'm going to keep going with this, push and curve, working at opposites. Now, when people are learning, quite often what happens is they push up against the side, but then as soon as they start to curve over that stone, they take the pressure off. So it's not going to end up sitting nice and tight. It's really important when you push quite hard, and then when you go over the curve, you also push it over quite hard. Now can you see it's a little bit wonky, got gaps, so I need to keep persevering. The other thing is, especially with the pre-made settings, initially when you start, because you're pushing quite a lot of pressure onto that metal, it can stretch a little bit, so it feels as if you're not really getting anywhere. But then if you keep persevering, all of a sudden that little bit of metal will work harden and it will start to tighten up quite quickly. If I was using a rocker rather than a pusher, if it's a small stone, I would normally go sideways on and I'd be rocking over the curve. So again, push up against the side, rock over the curve. Or on larger stones, people quite often like to rock sideways. Ooh, like so. If I was using a teaspoon, I'm going to push up and then rock over. So you can see it's exactly the same motion. Push and rock. And I just need to keep going until it's nice and tight. When you've pushed as much as you can, that's when you're going to take the burnisher and you're just rubbing it. So you're rubbing it over that curve, and that's going to smooth it out. If there's any little crinkly bits, it's going to tighten it off a little bit more, but it's also going to make it nice and shiny at that point. So I just need to really persevere with this. You can either go sideways on, or if it feels better, you can move in that sort of motion, so sort of pushing it up and out. You just need to be careful. The ends of these are sharp, so you don't want to jab them into your finger or scratch them all over your work. You're just burnishing it, so pushing hard and rubbing. And again, if you were using a teaspoon, you could use the bowl of the teaspoon. You're going to push hard and rub. When you've run the burnisher, when you've rubbed it all around the outside, you can also take the tip and just gently rub it on that top edge, and that will make that top edge nice and shiny, but also just neaten up any little rough bits. I'm not pushing so hard that I run the risk of digging it down into the setting. There you go. So I just need to give this a little polish, a little clean and polish now, and it'll be all ready. If I put my finger on there and give it a rub, I can't feel the stone rocking around. It's nice and secure. It's been pushed over that curve. So you can see from this angle, the wall is now completely flush to the curve of the stone, rather than having a little straight wall all the way around it. And that's what's holding it in place, nice and tight. There we go, one cabochon stone set ring in a little pre-made bezel cup. Nice and tight over that curve of the stone. The stone doesn't wibble around, it's not loose, it's not going to come out. Easy peasy. I'm going to put some notes in the comments just to remind you what the tools are called and the most important elements, especially about making sure, if you remember back to last month's videos, that both bits that you're trying to solder together, so in this case that tiny cup and this bigger chunky ring band, need to be the same temperature, which means you need to put most of your heat onto the ring band because it's bigger, so it's going to take longer to get up to temperature, it's going to take more heat